The grand hall of the alien court stretched wider than any human could imagine. Tall columns of shining metal reached toward a ceiling that seemed to touch the sky. Strange lights hovered in the air, glowing softly and reflected off the polished floor. The court was full of aliens, their eyes sharp and cold, their faces cruel and full of pride. They moved gracefully, but every motion carried the weight of authority. Among them a small figure knelt, trembling with fear. He was a servant, mute by birth and completely alone in a world that did not care for the weak. The aliens laughed as he knelt there. Their voices echoed in the hall, sharp and loud. One of them, a tall being with blue scales and long fingers, raised a whip. Its tip glinted in the light, and the air seemed to tighten with tension. The servant flinched, but he could not cry out. He had no voice to plead for mercy, no words to explain himself. He could only bow his head, hoping that somehow the cruel beings would spare him. But the court did not spare anyone who looked weak. "Strike him again," said a voice like ice. The whip fell. The sound cracked through the hall and the aliens laughed louder. The servant's shoulders shook, but he did not scream. He could not. He had learned that noise brought only more punishment. He closed his eyes and tried to make himself invisible, even though he knew it was impossible. Among the crowd, a human janitor quietly swept the floor. He had been brought here to clean the court, a small job that humans usually did without notice. He had seen cruelty before, but nothing like this. The laughter, the whip, the fear in the servant's eyes, it filled him with anger. He paused, gripping his broom tightly. His heart raced, but his mind was clear. Someone had to stop this. Someone had to do something. The aliens continued to mock the servant. They moved around him like predators, circling, whispering, pointing. The servant could feel their eyes on him, their judgment pressing down like heavy stones. He could not move, could not speak, could only bear the punishment. Every strike of the whip left a mark, but it also left something else, a silent question. Who would help him? Who could? The human janitor's hands tightened around his broom. He could not speak the alien language perfectly, but he knew one truth: cruelty was never right. A whip fell again and the servant flinched. This time he looked up and his dark eyes met the janitor's. For the first time he felt a small spark of hope. The janitor's eyes were steady, full of fire. He did not look afraid. The servant had never seen anyone like this before. All the humans he had known were quiet, careful, afraid. But this human, he seemed different. Strong in a way that did not need words. The court noticed the human too. They paused for a moment, curious, whispering among themselves. Humans were not allowed to interfere in court matters. They were cleaners, servants, shadows in the background. But this one stood there, holding his broom as if it were a sword. His posture was simple, but something about him made the aliens uneasy. The whip hung in the hand of the tall alien, ready to strike again, but the laughter did not come as easily this time. The janitor stepped closer to the servant. He did not touch him, did not speak. He simply stood there, letting the court feel his presence. The servant trembled, but it was not just fear this time. There was a strange comfort, a feeling that he was not completely alone. The aliens shifted in their seats. Their eyes flicked between the janitor and the servant. For the first time, doubt crept into the hearts of the cruel beings. Could a human really challenge them? Could someone so small, so simple, really matter in this grand hall of power? Another strike was coming, and the servant closed his eyes, ready to bear it. But before the whip could fall, a sound echoed in the hall. It was not the whip, not a scream, not laughter. It was the soft sound of a broom sweeping the polished floor, steady and deliberate. The janitor had moved slightly, placing himself closer to the servant. His eyes never left the court. They shone with a quiet fury, a promise that cruelty would not go unchallenged. The aliens stopped laughing. Whispers ran through the hall. They had never seen a human act like this. One of them raised the whip again, unsure what to do. Another leaned toward him, whispering in a strange tongue. But the janitor did not flinch. He simply stood, calm and unwavering. The servant opened his eyes. Hope glimmered. Perhaps this time the pain could end. Perhaps someone would finally stand against the cruelty. And in that moment the hall seemed to change. The air shifted. The light reflected differently off the polished floor. The whip hung in the air, paused, waiting. The aliens realized that the story of this day might not be what they expected. The small, mute servant might not be alone after all. And the human janitor, quiet, steady and determined, was about to change everything. The human janitor took a deep breath and stepped closer to the servant. The polished floor shone beneath his boots, but he did not care about appearances. All he cared about was the small, trembling figure kneeling before the cruel aliens. The servant looked up, eyes wide with disbelief. He had never imagined anyone would dare to interfere, especially a human. But here was one, moving forward calmly as if he belonged in the Hall of Power. The aliens watched him, curious and angry. They whispered to each other, their voices sharp like knives. "Who does he think he is?" one hissed. "Humans are cleaners. They have no place here." Another shook its head, its long fingers brushing against the golden railing. The janitor did not answer them. He did not speak at all. Instead, he stopped a few steps from the servant and stood tall. His posture was simple, but it carried weight. His eyes were steady, unafraid. The whip in the alien's hand was still raised, ready to strike. The servant flinched, pressing his face to the floor, expecting another blow. But nothing came. The janitor reached out, not to grab the whip yet, but to show that he would not let the cruelty continue. The court fell silent. For the first time the laughter faded. The aliens could feel the power in the human's courage. It was not the power of size or strength or authority. It was something different. Something dangerous to those who relied on fear. A few whispers of doubt spread among the aliens. They had never seen a human act without fear in the face of their punishments. Most humans cowered, spoke carefully, avoided attention. But this one? This one did not even flinch. He stood as though the whip and the court itself were nothing. The servant dared to lift his head slightly, hope flickering in his dark eyes. Perhaps someone would finally protect him. Perhaps the pain would end. The tall alien with the whip stepped forward, its face twisting with anger. "How dare you interfere?" it hissed in the alien tongue. Its claws flexed. The court watched, eager to see what would happen. Other humans had never dared approach, let alone challenge the court's punishments. The janitor remained silent. His hands rested loosely at his sides. He did not step back. He did not retreat. The hall seemed to hold its breath. Then, slowly, the janitor lifted his hand and pointed toward the whip. He did not speak the alien language perfectly, but he gestured clearly. He meant that the punishment must stop. The court gasped. A human telling an alien court how to act? It was unheard of. The whispers became louder, nervous. One of the nobles leaned toward another, shaking its head. "This human, he is not like the others. He does not fear us." The whip dropped slightly as if the alien holding it sensed the change in the air. The janitor's courage was not violent. He did not threaten with weapons or shout with anger. He simply stood there, calm and determined, a small figure with a quiet strength that filled the vast hall. The servant's eyes followed him, fear mixing with awe. He could not speak, but he felt gratitude deeper than words could describe. Other servants in the hall began to notice too. They had always been silent, always careful, always obedient. But seeing the human stand without fear made something stir inside them. A spark of hope, of bravery. If this human could face the court, perhaps they could too. They shifted slightly, small movements that did not go unnoticed. The aliens noticed the change, their confidence faltering. The laughter that had once filled the hall was gone, replaced by a tense, uneasy silence. The janitor's gaze swept across the court. He looked at each alien not with hatred but with a steady warning. He did not raise his voice. He did not strike. Yet the silence itself became powerful. It spoke of consequences, of courage, of honor. One by one, the aliens realized that the day was no longer entirely under their control. Something had changed, and it was not something they could easily reverse. The whip hovered in the air, paused. The servant dared to straighten, trembling but no longer cowering completely. He sensed that the human would protect him. The janitor's eyes met his, a silent promise passing between them. The servant's heart swelled with hope. Perhaps this human could challenge the court, perhaps he could do what no one else had dared. A few moments passed in silence. The court could feel the tension, thick and heavy. The janitor did not move unnecessarily. He stood still, simple and human, but unstoppable in his quiet defiance. The servant looked around at the faces of the aliens and realized that fear had begun to leave him, replaced by trust and hope. The human had shown him that even in the heart of cruelty, courage could shine. And in that moment, the grand hall of the alien court felt smaller. The power of the whip, the arrogance of the nobles, the laughter and cruelty, they all seemed weaker in the presence of one human janitor who would not bow, who would not hide, who would not be afraid. The court, for the first time, was uncertain. The servant, once silent and alone, began to feel that maybe, just maybe, he would survive. And the human, calm and determined, prepared to act, knowing that the next step could change everything. The grand hall remained tense as the human janitor took another step forward. The whip still hovered in the hand of the tall alien, but the court's laughter had vanished. The servant's eyes followed the janitor, hope flickering where there had only been fear. The janitor's hands were empty, yet every movement he made spoke of power, not the kind measured in strength or claws, but a quiet, unyielding courage. The hall seemed to grow smaller, as if the presence of one brave human could shift the balance of the entire court. The aliens whispered among themselves. Their voices were sharp, nervous. They had never seen such defiance. One of the nobles leaned forward, long fingers tapping on the railing, while another shook its scaled head in disbelief. "Is he serious?" one hissed. "Does he not fear us?" The janitor did not respond. He only kept his eyes steady on the servant, who was trembling but slowly lifting his head. Every step the janitor took was careful, deliberate, meant to calm, not threaten. Yet the court felt the weight of his presence. The whip, once a symbol of cruelty, now seemed awkward in the alien's grasp. The janitor stopped a few feet away from the servant. He bent slightly, not to pick up the whip yet, but to show that he would not allow any more harm. The servant looked at him with wide, shining eyes. For the first time he did not feel completely powerless. A human had stepped in. A human had chosen to act. The thought was almost overwhelming. He had never imagined that someone could care enough to stand in front of him, to face the court, to challenge their cruelty. The tall alien tightened its grip on the whip, its body tense. Its eyes, sharp as knives, darted between the human and the servant. "Do you dare interfere in the court?" it asked, its voice echoing through the hall. "Do you not know your place?" The janitor did not answer. He only stood taller. His silence was louder than words. It was a statement that cruelty would not go unchallenged. That injustice would not be ignored. That even one human could make a difference in the heart of the alien court. The court shivered at the unexpected challenge. The nobles had always relied on fear. Fear kept everyone in place. But now fear shifted. The aliens began to notice something else: respect, unease, and maybe even a hint of doubt. The janitor's courage spread like a ripple through the room. The smaller servants began to stir, glancing at him with curiosity and hope. If he could do it, perhaps they could too. Perhaps the punishment did not have to continue. The whip fell slightly as the alien guarding the servant hesitated. The janitor's eyes met the alien's. He did not threaten with his hands. He did not shout. He simply held the gaze, steady and unyielding. The alien felt something it had never felt before: the fear of losing control. The whip now seemed less a tool of power and more a burden, an awkward instrument in a world that had suddenly changed. The servant felt his knees stop shaking. He was still small, still powerless by the court standards, but he could feel courage growing inside him. The janitor moved one step closer and tapped lightly on the floor with the broom he still held. The sound echoed sharply, like a signal, like a call for order. The court froze. The whispering stopped. All eyes turned toward the human. He had no title, no rank, no armor, yet he commanded attention. The whip hung still. The servant's heart raced. Could it be that the punishment would finally stop? Could someone really stand up to this court? Slowly, the janitor extended a hand toward the whip. Not to take it in anger, not to strike, but to show that he would face the cruelty head-on. The court tensed, unsure what he might do. The servant's eyes widened, hope growing stronger. The janitor's hand did not tremble. His grip was calm and firm, a signal that he would act with control, with justice. The aliens, for the first time, felt the weight of courage greater than fear. The whispers of doubt became murmurs of fear. The human did not shout. He did not move violently. He only reached for the whip, and in that simple act the balance of power began to shift. The court had always ruled with cruelty, but now one human had shown them that cruelty was not absolute. Strength could come from courage, from morality, from the will to protect the weak. The servant felt a spark of hope grow into a flame. Other servants began to stir, their eyes following the human's every movement. Even those who had spent years in silence and fear felt something awaken inside them. The janitor's bravery was contagious. One by one, their small acts of defiance began to form. The aliens, sensing the change, shifted nervously. They had never encountered humans like this, humans who could inspire hope, who could challenge authority with nothing but quiet courage. The janitor finally reached the whip and held it in his hand. The court was silent. The servant looked at him, awe and gratitude shining in his eyes. The janitor did not strike. He did not raise his voice. He simply stood there, holding the symbol of cruelty in a way that showed it could be turned into something just. The balance had shifted and the court could feel it. One human, small and simple, had shown them that courage could change everything. In that moment, the grand hall of the alien court seemed smaller. The power of the whip, the arrogance of the nobles, the laughter and cruelty, they all seemed weaker. The human janitor had turned the tables. And the servant, once silent and trembling, now dared to hope that he might finally be safe. The grand hall of the alien court had changed. The air was heavy with tension, and the echoes of past laughter seemed distant now. The human janitor stood with the whip in his hand, calm and steady. His simple posture, so ordinary yet so defiant, had shifted the balance of power. The aliens who had once laughed without mercy, now looked uncertain. Their eyes darted to each other, to the human, and to the trembling servant he had come to protect. The court had never faced a challenge like this. Whispers ran through the room. "Has a human ever done this before?" one alien asked, its voice low and wary. Another shook its head. "Impossible. Humans are meant to obey, not to challenge us." But here he was, standing quietly yet boldly, showing that even the smallest being could make a difference. The servant, still kneeling, dared to lift his head higher. He could feel hope growing inside him like sunlight breaking through dark clouds. The janitor's presence inspired more than just the servant. The minor servants scattered around the hall began to stir. They had spent years in silence, hiding their fear, obeying every cruel command. But seeing a human stand without fear awakened something inside them. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, they straightened their backs. Their eyes, once filled only with fear, now carried a glimmer of courage. One by one they began to realize that the court's power was not absolute. The tall alien holding the whip tried to regain control. Its claws flexed and its sharp eyes glared at the human. "Return the whip," it commanded, voice cold and commanding. But the janitor did not move. He did not bow. He held the whip loosely, a simple gesture that said he would not let cruelty continue. The court murmured nervously. Fear was giving way to doubt. The alien tried to strike, but its hand froze. The whip felt heavier in its grasp, as if the courage of the human had made it harder to use. The servant's eyes widened. He could not speak, but he felt a deep gratitude toward the human. For the first time he realized that he was not alone. Someone cared. Someone brave enough to face the court and refuse to bow. The janitor did not shout, did not threaten. He simply stood there, calm and steady, radiating a strength that the court could not ignore. The aliens realized that the human's courage was contagious. If one being could stand, others might follow. Other servants began to shift slightly, small movements that showed their growing confidence. One reached out to steady a fallen broom, another straightened a loose robe. The aliens noticed these actions, these tiny signs of defiance. They had never seen it before. The court that ruled through fear now felt the cracks in its power. Whispers spread, "The humans, they are different. They do not obey fear alone." The grand hall, once full of certainty and cruelty, now seemed unstable. The janitor stepped forward, holding the whip as a symbol, not a weapon. The servant rose slowly to his feet, trembling but unafraid this time. He followed the human's example, standing tall despite the fear that had always chained him. The other servants watched, inspired. Even some minor nobles in the court shifted in their seats, uncertain how to respond. The balance of power had changed in ways no one expected. The tall alien with the whip finally lowered it slightly, its body tense. Its confidence had faltered. It realized that punishing the servant now might provoke more resistance than obedience. The janitor's calm defiance had unsettled not just one alien, but the entire court. Every eye in the hall seemed to notice it, feel it, fear it. The once cruel court now seemed fragile, almost human in its uncertainty. The human janitor did not speak. He did not need to. His simple action said everything. Cruelty would not stand if someone had the courage to challenge it. The servant, now standing, glanced at him with awe and gratitude. His heart was lighter than it had ever been. The other servants followed, small but significant, showing that courage could grow, even in the darkest places. The court murmured nervously. The aliens had always believed their power was unchallenged. They had never considered that courage, even from one small human, could change everything. The grand hall, once echoing with laughter at the servant's pain, now echoed with uncertainty and tension. The janitor held the whip gently, a reminder that justice and mercy were stronger than fear and cruelty. The human's quiet bravery had turned the hall upside down. The servant, once silent and trembling, now dared to hope. The other servants were inspired. Even the nobles felt the weight of a challenge they had never expected. The janitor's courage had shown that even one being, small and simple, could shake the foundation of a mighty alien court. For the first time the grand hall felt the power of justice, hope and courage. And in that moment the aliens understood something new. Strength was not only in claws, scales, or power. Strength could come from heart, from courage, and from the will to protect those who could not defend themselves. The court was shaken. The whip was no longer a symbol of fear, but a reminder that even in the grandest halls of power, a single act of bravery could change everything. The grand hall of the alien court was quiet, but the tension remained thick in the air. The human janitor stood with the whip in his hands, calm and unshaken. The once cruel court now watched him with a mix of fear, confusion, and awe. The servant, once trembling and mute, now stood a few steps away, his head held high. For the first time he felt safe. He could not speak, but his eyes shone with gratitude and hope. The janitor had shown him that someone cared. That courage mattered. That even a human, a simple janitor, could change the course of events in the grandest halls of power. The minor servants began to move with small but purposeful gestures. One adjusted the folds of a robe for another. Another placed a dropped cup carefully back on a tray. They were still silent, still cautious, but their fear had lessened. They had seen what one human could do, and it had sparked something in them. The court, once confident in its cruelty, now noticed the shift. It was subtle, almost invisible, but it was there. Courage was spreading like fire in dry grass. The aliens who had laughed at the servant before now looked uneasy. The tall alien with the whip tightened its grip, then loosened it. The whip no longer seemed a tool of power, it seemed a symbol of restraint, a challenge to the arrogance of the court itself. The janitor's calm presence had reminded everyone that cruelty was never true strength. The servant glanced at him, admiration and awe shining in his eyes. He could not speak, but he understood clearly. The human had saved him, and in doing so, had shown the court the power of justice and heart. The janitor slowly stepped forward, holding the whip not as a weapon but as a symbol. Every movement was deliberate and gentle. He did not strike. He did not threaten. Yet every eye in the hall felt the weight of his courage. The court had believed that fear was absolute. They had relied on it to maintain control. But now they realized something new. Courage, even from one simple human, could change the rules. Strength was not only in power or claws, but in heart, in bravery, in the willingness to protect others. The servants, encouraged by the janitor's actions, began to rise slowly. One by one they stood taller, moved with more confidence. Their small acts of defiance were enough to unsettle the court further. The whispers of doubt grew louder. The aliens had expected obedience, silence, and fear. Instead they saw bravery, unity, and hope. Even some minor nobles shifted uneasily in their seats. They could sense that the court's control had weakened. Something fundamental had changed in the presence of one determined human. The servant, still silent, stepped forward and bowed slightly to the janitor. It was a gesture full of gratitude, respect, and relief. The janitor nodded softly, a small smile on his face. He did not boast. He did not demand praise. He had acted because it was the right thing to do. The whip, once a symbol of cruelty, was now a tool that reminded the court that power without justice was fragile. The aliens could feel it, and even the proudest among them could not ignore it. The hall, once echoing with laughter at pain, now resonated with a quiet awe. The humans, the servant and the janitor, had reminded everyone of a truth the court had ignored, that courage and honor could exist in anyone regardless of size, rank, or species. Fear no longer ruled the room. Hope had taken its place. The janitor's calm bravery had become a lesson, a silent proclamation that justice and mercy were stronger than cruelty and mockery. The court could not punish him. The whip had changed from a weapon into a symbol of what should be: restraint, courage, and honor. The janitor handed the whip back to the alien guard, not in submission, but as a reminder that cruelty was no longer acceptable. The alien took it with hesitation, realizing that their laughter, their arrogance, had been challenged and found weak. The servant remained standing, trembling only slightly but safe. His silent gratitude toward the janitor filled the room more than words ever could. The human janitor returned to his simple work of sweeping the floor. He moved quietly, methodically, but the impression he had left was impossible to ignore. The court, once proud and cruel, had been reminded that power alone did not define strength. Courage, honor, and the willingness to protect the weak were forces that no court, no whip, and no fear could overcome. The servants who had witnessed this moment would carry the lesson for years to come. Even the aliens would remember the day when one human showed them that heroism could come from the most unexpected places. The servant finally allowed himself to smile, a small, silent gesture of relief and hope. He knew he had been saved, and he knew the court had been changed. The janitor's courage had shown him and everyone present that even in a world ruled by cruelty and fear, honor and bravery could shine. Humanity in its quiet way had left a mark that no alien court could erase. The hall was no longer just a place of judgment and laughter, it was a place where courage, hope and justice had triumphed. And so, in the vast alien court, a simple human janitor had proven something extraordinary, that even one being standing for what is right, could change the hearts of the many, protect the weak and shine brighter than any crown or throne. The servant remained safe, the court remained shaken, and humanity had once again shown its power, not in weapons, not in force, but in courage, honor, and the willingness to do what was right.